Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the mud-soaked footpaths and candlelit corners of Western Europe's so-called Dark Ages, where even the idea of comfort hadn't been invented yet. You wake up groggy, cold, and confused, curled under a matted wool blanket beside a hearth that went out sometime before dawn. The walls of your home, if we can call it that, are timber and daub, stained with years of smoke and soaked from last night's rain. You don't have a pillow. Your mattress is just a sack stuffed with straw. You slept next to your entire family, and maybe a chicken. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far this sleepy little show travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a wheat gray light filtering through slits in your wooden walls. There's no glass in the window, just a wooden shutter propped open for air, which you instantly regret. The breeze carries the scent of wet hay, smoke, and something rotting. It might be the compost heap. It might be your uncle. Your bed, such as it is, creaks as you shift. The straw pokes you in places it shouldn't. Your clothes? You slept in them. Of course you did. No one undresses at night, partly because it's freezing, partly because your only other tunic has fleas, and partly because that would be weird in a room full of people. The floor is packed earth, uneven, with a few suspicious puddles. One of them moves. You pretend not to notice. You shuffle to your feet, your wool tunic clinging to you from last night's sweat. A small fire crackles in the hearth now. Someone woke before you. Probably your mother, already tossing barley mash into a pot and pretending not to hear your father cursing at a twisted ankle. He stepped in the chamber pot last night. Again. You splash your face with water from a cracked clay jug. It's barely above freezing. You wake up a little more. The water smells faintly of moss and something metallic. Welcome to medieval Europe, where bathing is suspicious. Water is not to be trusted. And everyone has at least one parasite. Probably two. Probably inherited. Your home, like most in the village, is a one-room hut built with whatever could be scavenged. Wattle and daub walls, a thatched roof that leaks when it wants attention, and no separation between you and the pigs during winter. If you're lucky, your family owns the hut. If you're not, you're renting from a lord who doesn't remember your name but remembers your taxes. You trudge outside, dodging a loose chicken and the neighbor's dog, which growls with the dead eyes of something that's seen too much. Mud sucks at your worn leather shoes, shoes that have no left or right. Just shoe. You pass other villagers doing the same bleary shuffle, women hauling buckets, men scratching themselves unapologetically, children chasing geese with sticks. The goose is winning. The streets are less street, more shared slime trench. There's no sewage system. Waste flows where gravity takes it, which is usually toward your door. Someone once called these organic pathways. That someone was probably trampled by an ox cart shortly after. You pause to sneeze. Someone crosses themselves. Superstition is the main currency here, followed closely by literal dung. In the distance, a bell tolls from the church. It's not for time, it's for prayers, or a funeral, or lunch. Time is measured by sun and sound, and no one really knows what noon is. You're technically a peasant, which sounds romantic if you've never smelled a peasant before. You work the land, mostly by hand. You own a scythe, a shovel, and 3 fingers that bend the wrong way now. Your hands are permanently crusted with something. Soap is for holy days, or dying days, or both. Historians still argue whether life in a medieval village was always this grim, or if we modern folks just focus too much on the worst bits. But look around. There's a dead rat in the well. Your cousin caught the sweating sickness yesterday, and nobody's sure what that even is. And a man near the smithy is screaming about demons again. Still, this is home, and for all its damp despair, people here find joy. Small things. Bread that rose properly. A child who survived the week. A new thatch roof that keeps out most of the rain. You head toward the field, or at least, the general direction of where you think the field is. The fog is thick today, and the trees loom like suspicious old men. You clutch your hoe, hand-carved, blunt, but precious. You step over a stream that's probably half fish, half sewage. It bubbles ominously. Midway to the field, you pass old Agnes. She spits twice and gives you a nod. You nod back, slightly lower. She's rumored to be part witch, part saint, and all gossip. Cross her and your sheep get sick. Praise her and she gives you willow bark for your headache. You always praise her. A cow moos plaintively. It's stuck in a ditch again. You help pull it out with 3 other villagers, using a rope that smells like last year's fish. The cow stares at you with profound disappointment. You apologize out loud. The others nod solemnly. Everyone talks to animals. They're better listeners than humans. Your stomach grumbles. You've had nothing but air and old breath since last night. Breakfast comes later, and it won't be good. Back home, the village buzzes into some semblance of function. Smoke curls from chimneys. Children chase each other with sticks they swear are swords. A man sings a hymn while sweeping dust from one pile to another. A woman curses at a loaf of bread that won't rise again. The sun finally emerges, weak and pale, like someone tried to paint it and gave up halfway. The light reveals the texture of your village in brutal honesty. Everything is brown, wet, and vaguely twitching. You wonder briefly if you'll live to see summer. Quirky detail? The average medieval peasant might only bathe a few times a year. But they really loved scented herbs, lavender pouches, rosemary bundles, even stuffing flowers in their clothes to mask the smell. You, right now, have a sprig of sage tucked under your collar. You don't remember why, but it smells nicer than you do. Another bell, another shuffle of people. This one might mean work, or prayer, or soup. You follow the crowd because thinking too hard leads to questions, and questions lead to church trials. On the far edge of the village, a man is carving wood into a vaguely horse-like shape. He says it's for a festival. You don't remember any festival. He winks. You leave. Back inside your hut, the fire is stoked. Your mother hands you a crust of bread. Impossibly hard. You chew it like it insulted your family. It tastes like yesterday and maybe something medicinal. Your father says it'll toughen you up. You believe him. You also lose a tooth. Outside, someone yells. A goat has climbed onto the roof again. The roof collapses. Everyone laughs. You laugh too. Not because it's funny, because if you don't, you'll cry. And you already did that during Lent. As the day truly begins, you glance at the sky. It's the same color as your tunic, unwashed wool. You sigh. You scratch. You go back to the fields. And thus begins another day in medieval Europe. You'll survive it. Maybe. Probably not. You're not exactly excited for breakfast, but your stomach is staging a mutiny. Hunger is less of a feeling and more of a constant dull ache. Like a background noise you can't quite ignore. It's been a while since you felt full, and even longer since you tasted anything resembling seasoning. If salt were currency, you'd be bankrupt. Today's meal is, predictably, bread. It's made from barley or rye, depending on what survived the mold last week. Wheat? That's for lords. The bread is dense, slightly gray, and tough enough to break a window, or a molar. You soak it in weak ale because the water might kill you. Again, the ale is flat, warm, and slightly sour. It's safer than water because the brewing process kills most of the delightful microbes trying to murder your intestines. Children drink it, the elderly drink it, and now, you drink it too, pretending it tastes better than it does. You chew slowly, partly to make the bread last, partly because your jaw isn't convinced it's worth the effort. As you chew, you remember last night's dream, a roasted apple. Just that, no context, no sauces, just a hot, soft apple. You miss it already. Historians still argue whether most medieval peasants were constantly malnourished or just intermittently miserable. Some evidence suggests they got more calories than we'd expect, especially during harvest or festival seasons. But quality? Not so much. If food pyramid had existed, yours would be a mud triangle labeled bread, more bread, and turnips. Your meal is interrupted by a small, aggressive piglet. It wants your crust. You're not in the mood to negotiate. You stare at it. It stares back. You hiss. It hisses louder. You retreat. The pig wins. This is how kingdoms fall. A neighbor passes by, holding a basket of eggs. She looks smug. You suspect sorcery, or chickens. You make your way toward the communal oven. That's right, your village doesn't have personal ovens. Firewood is expensive, and fire is a luxury. Most bread is baked in a shared stone oven in the center of town. And today is your family's turn. The baker, a round man with no eyebrows, long story, nods solemnly and takes your dough. Risen? He asks. You shrug. The dough was placed by the fire overnight and did something. Whether it counts as rising is a theological debate. He grunts, tosses it into the oven, and marks your name with a chalk symbol you pretend to understand. You'll come back later. Maybe it'll be edible, maybe not. Either way, it's dinner. Walking back, your stomach resumes its discontented gurgling. You try to distract yourself by gathering greens from the hedgerow. Dandelion leaves, sorrel, and something that may or may not be stinging nettle. You pretend it's salad. It pretends it isn't trying to poison you. Every once in a while, the village holds a feast. Maybe a wedding, maybe a holy day, maybe just a good hunt. But today is a regular day. Which means porridge, root vegetables, and if you're lucky, a scrap of bacon fat to rub on the bread. You did that last week. The memory still makes you smile. Mid-morning hunger is soothed only by distraction. So you take a stroll toward the market square, if you can call it that. It's really just a flat space near the well where people shout about turnips and occasionally fistfight over eggs. A toothless man is selling onions. He smells like onions. You trade him a carved wooden spoon for two small, shriveled ones. You feel cheated. He feels victorious. You're both right. A young boy is trying to barter a dead squirrel. You move along quickly. The butcher has one chicken hanging upside down. It blinks slowly. You nod in sympathy. It clucks ominously. You back away. A quirky tidbit for you. In some regions, people didn't just eat bread, they wore it. Hard, stale loaves called trenches were used as edible plates. After meals, the grease-soaked bread was given to the poor or the dogs. Sometimes it was hard to tell which you were. Back home, your mother is boiling something. It smells vegetable adjacent. Probably a stew. Probably. The pot bubbles threateningly, and you recognize a piece of last week's parsnip, now heroic in its second tour of duty. You help chop greens and add them to the pot. Your knife is blunt, your fingers are quick, and your reflexes are honed from years of near misses. Once, you nicked yourself and had to wrap your hand in moss for a week. It worked, mostly. Noon approaches, or something like it. The sun is overhead-ish, and the birds have stopped singing. That usually means it's mealtime, or a storm, or both. You gather around the pot with your family. There's no table, just wooden stools and laps. You each get a bowl, more of a scoop. Really, and the stew is ladled out with practiced fairness. 2 ladles per person, 3 if you're lucky, 1 if your brother stole the good turnip yesterday. You sip carefully. It's hot, bland, and vaguely comforting. The kind of food that fills space but not joy. Still, you're grateful. Last month's blight nearly wiped out the cabbage patch. Your father mutters something about the Lord's steward demanding another cart of grain. Your mother tightens her jaw. The taxman came last week. He left with all the best barley and a goose that definitely wasn't his. Justice is theoretical here. You finish the meal and wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve. Napkins are for nobles. You burp softly. No one notices. Your little sister sticks a parsnip up her nose. You admire her spirit. There's still a half loaf of bread left. You wrap it carefully in cloth and place it on a high shelf. Far from rats, toddlers, and spiritual temptation, it might be tomorrow's breakfast. It might be next week's feast. Time and mold will decide. In the yard, you spot your neighbor gnawing a bone with existential determination. He waves cheerfully. You wave back, with slightly more concern. Food preservation is a game of strategy and luck. Smoking, salting, drying. These are common methods. You once tried to preserve a fish in honey. It did not go well. You don't talk about the bee incident. You've got chores now, but your stomach is heavier than usual. You allow yourself a moment to sit by the hearth. Eyes half-lidded, staring into the embers. You imagine a banquet table, roasted fowl, spiced wine, buttery cheese wheels stacked like golden bricks. You blink. Back to reality. A goat just walked into the hut again. Goats have no boundaries. Later that day, Your aunt stops by with a small sack of beans and a story about her third cousin marrying a bishop's nephew. You nod, accept the beans, and ignore the implications. The beans smell vaguely fermented. That's either good or very, very bad. You help your mother dig up more roots for tomorrow's stew. The soil is soft from rain. And you find a carrot that looks like a tiny man. You name him Harold. You do not eat Harold. A child cries in the distance. That usually means someone's loaf fell into the fire again. You shrug. Happens. Toward evening, someone lights a torch in the square. There's no street lighting, obviously. So after dark you're either inside or tripping over livestock. You remember the last time you stayed out too late. A hedgehog startled you, and you screamed so loudly the priest came running. He was not amused. Evening meals are leftovers, cold stew, hardened bread, and the last of the nettle greens. You chew methodically, eyes drooping. Someone passes you a plum. You nearly cry from joy. It's only half rotten. Before bed, your father says a prayer. You bow your head and whisper the same words you've said every night since you could talk. They don't always make sense, but they're yours. You curl up on the straw mattress again, this time with a full-ish belly and only mild nausea. The hut creaks. Someone snores. A rooster crows prematurely. You glare in its direction. It does not apologize. You're alive. You're fed. You didn't contract anything new, probably. And for a medieval peasant, that's a good day. It's early again. You don't need a rooster to know. Your nose tells you first, smoke, damp wool, and the faintly tragic scent of unwashed bodies. Your back tells you next. Sleeping on straw is a romantic idea until the mice move in and one of them brings friends. One of those friends is probably named Flea. You stretch, wince, and remember. Today is workday, which is also every day. There's no weekend getaway, no brunch, no paid time off. There's just today, and you're expected in the fields. Rain or shine, or, more often, mud and aching feet. A short walk outside, and your ankles are swallowed by a mix of dewy grass and yesterday's regret. Your boots are mostly held together with leather laces and wishful thinking. You squish through the pasture toward your first task of the day, helping plow. The oxen snort like they know they're the stars of the show. They're also smarter than your cousin, who once tried to harness a goat to the plow. The goat still holds a grudge. You take hold of the wooden plow handle. It's smooth from years of calloused hands like yours, though every knot and bump still tries to sneak in a splinter. The oxen lurch forward, and your body jolts as you try to keep up. It's less guiding, and more desperately holding on. The plow squeals like a pig being read bad poetry, and the earth parts in uneven slices. You glance over at a neighboring field. A man is plowing with a team of mules. You envy him, briefly. Then you remember they bite. Everything in this world either bites, stings, or taxes you. Historians still argue whether medieval plowing techniques were tragically inefficient or surprisingly clever for their time. There's evidence of advanced three-field crop rotation in some places, an ingenious system where one field rests while the others grow crops. Of course, your village still swears by the two-field method. Progress is for other people. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow. It's not even mid-morning, and your shirt's already clinging like damp laundry. Someone brings out a pail of ale. You gulp like it's magic, because, honestly, in this era, it kind of is. Plowing continues until the oxen decide otherwise. One of them stops and stares at the horizon as if questioning the meaning of life. You do the same. Nothing changes. While someone coaxes the ox back into cooperation using a turnip bribe. You take a break and watch the crows peck at freshly unearthed worms. You shoo them away half-heartedly. They'll be back. Crows are smarter than most of your village council. Lunchtime arrives, or you pretend it does. Since your stomach stopped trusting you around age 9. You sit in the shade of a barely adequate tree and tear off a piece of bread from your morning rations. It's dry. It's tough. It's familiar. Comforting in a way. Like a bad song you know all the lyrics to. You share a pickle with the man beside you. He nods in solemn gratitude, as if you've gifted him a golden coin. In truth, it was the last pickle in your house, and you're wondering why you didn't eat it yourself. But there's honor in sharing vinegar-soaked vegetables. Across the field, a woman is gathering stones. Not for anything artistic, just to clear the way for planting. You join her. It's strangely satisfying, stacking rocks into neat piles that will be used later for fences. Or thrown during disagreements. Dual purpose. A quirky tidbit for your dusty mental archive, in some medieval villages. Folks believed plowing at certain times of the month could offend local spirits. There were rules. No tilling during full moons or on saints' days. Breaking the rule? That could lead to crop failure, sick animals, or mysteriously sour milk. You don't mess with sour milk. Ever. Afternoon rolls in, and your shoulders ache like a bard's love song, repetitive and dramatic. The sun, still judging you from above, refuses to give shade. Clouds, as usual, are absent when needed most. You switch from plowing to sowing. That means scattering seeds across the soil and praying that birds don't turn it into a buffet. Some farmers sing as they sow. You hum tunelessly and hope the effort counts. Seed bags are heavy. They dig into your shoulder and leave itchy welts. You think about writing a strongly worded letter to gravity. You don't have parchment, or ink, or literacy, so the thought fades. By late afternoon, you're hobbling rather than walking. Someone tosses you a turnip. You consider throwing it back, then realize it's your dinner. You mutter thanks and take a bite. It's raw, earthy, and slightly peppery. Also, better than last week's moldy pear incident. Your fingers are stained with dirt. Your clothes are stiff with sweat. You smell like someone buried a sock under a cheese wheel and waited a week. And you're still better off than some. You pass by a field of flax and wonder what poor soul gets to soak it in urine to make linen thread. Then you remember your uncle. You mentally send him your sympathies and an imaginary flower. You think about washing. Maybe, later, if the river isn't too cold. If the fish aren't aggressive. If your cousin hasn't claimed bathing rights again. He says it helps him court the ladies. No one believes him. You finally stagger back home. Limbs humming with that special blend of fatigue and resentment. The hut is warm and smoky. And you can barely smell the stew over your own body. Progress. Your mother hands you a small piece of cheese. It's hard, slightly green, and smells like ancient regrets. But it's cheese. You kiss her cheek and bite down carefully. There's talk of rain tomorrow. Rain means mud. Mud means slipping. Slipping means laughter from others and bruises for you. You sigh and mentally prepare your ankles. Before bed, you rinse your hands in a wooden basin of water that's seen better days. The water is brownish, but at least it's yours. You scrub off dirt, but the stains in your skin are like medieval tattoos, earned, not chosen. You lie down again, body thrumming from labor. Your legs twitch, your back whispers threats, but your mind drifts easily. Today was long, tomorrow will be longer. Outside, the wind howls like a drunk monk with bagpipes. You smile. It's comforting in a weird way. Your father snores like he's arguing with the heavens. Your little sister mutters nonsense in her sleep. You pull the scratchy blanket up and let the ache settle into something dull and almost pleasant. Somewhere in the dark, a cow moos mournfully. Maybe it knows something you don't. Or maybe it's just mad about milking duty tomorrow. You understand. The rooster's back. Or maybe it never left. You wake not to the soft light of dawn, but to a full-throated declaration of feathery tyranny. It's early, it's loud, and it's personal. You consider revenge, but you also consider breakfast. And in your world, the chicken stays alive for eggs. Your muscles creak like a cart with uneven wheels. You shuffle toward the hearth, where embers still glow beneath the ash. A good sign. You gently coax the fire back to life, blowing and poking like a medieval dragon whisperer. Today's agenda? Milking. And it's your turn. Again. The barn greets you with its usual perfume, hay, manure, and the distinct tang of dairy aspirations. The cow eyes you with equal parts suspicion and disappointment. You mumble something about just doing your job, and settle onto the milking stool. You start rhythmically. Squeeze. Release. Squeeze. Release. The tin pail sings its soft metal ping with every drop. It's oddly meditative until the cow shifts, swats you with its tail, and sneezes hay in your face. Lovely. Cow successfully emptied and only mildly offended. You carry the pail home like it's a prize. Your mother filters it through a cloth, hopefully not the same one from last week, and sets some aside to sour into curd. It's a delicacy, or a dare, depends on the day. You don't get to rest. There's weaving to do, and that's not poetic. The spinning wheel creaks as your sister turns flax into thread. You're tasked with winding, measuring, and sometimes entangling knots with the rage of someone trying to unknot a pair of medieval shoelaces. Which, yes, exist, and yes, are also a pain. Thread leads to cloth. Cloth leads to clothing. Clothing leads to not freezing to death. There's a grim logic to it. And if you're lucky, someone in the village might trade a bit of dyed fabric for a wedge of good cheese or a couple of salted fish. Barter is king. And coins? Well, unless you're part of the nobility or a merchant, they're rare enough to be mythical, like dragons, or a neighbor who returns borrowed tools. Historians still debate how cashless village economies truly were during the Dark Ages. Some argue that rural folk had access to more coinage than we assume, while others insist barter ruled supreme. You don't know. You just know that last month you swapped a comb for half a rabbit and considered it a win. By mid-morning, the bell tolls, not for you, thankfully, but from the nearby monastery. Their bells regulate everything. Prayer, meals, time itself. You don't envy the monks. But sometimes, just sometimes, their quiet life and daily bread look better than your muddy misery. You get a brief reprieve. Message delivery. A merchant needs a note sent to a neighboring village. You're cheap, you're fast, and you only complain a little. You tuck the parchment in a leather pouch and head out. The road isn't much of a road. It's more of a suggestion. Ruts, roots, and rocks compete to trip you. Trees arch overhead like conspirators. Birds sing cheerful lies about freedom. Halfway through the journey, you stop at a stream to drink. The water is cold and clear enough. Probably safe. You sip carefully, hoping not to swallow anything that wriggles. Last month, your cousin did and spent 3 days shouting at shadows. On the way, you pass a small shrine tucked into the woods, a stone figure of a saint. Worn smooth by time and weather. People leave offerings. Coins. Bread crusts. Little bundles of herbs. You add a pebble. Because why not? The saint seems cool. Then there's the crossroad. And with it, a decision. Right leads to the village. Left leads to the forest. You pause. The message can wait. Curiosity wins. You duck into the trees. Your feet silent on the loam. Sunlight filters down in speckled beams. It's oddly beautiful, peaceful, even, until you remember that people say the forest is haunted. And not just by ghosts. By green men, wild spirits of the woods, covered in leaves and fond of riddles. Or wolves, or bandits. Honestly, in this world, sometimes they're the same thing. You stumble upon an old stone circle, moss-covered and forgotten. You wonder what it was for. Some ancient rite? A lost calendar? Historians still argue whether these megaliths were purely astronomical, ritualistic, or just very dramatic lawn ornaments. You touch one of the stones. It's warm. Maybe from the sun. Maybe from something else. You don't stay to find out. Back on the road, the village comes into view. It's smaller than yours, but with better fences. Everyone here seems suspicious of outsiders. You get the note delivered. Trade a joke with a toothless blacksmith. And accept a hunk of stale bread as thanks. Currency of champions. On the way home, clouds gather. The sky grumbles. And soon, you're caught in it. Medieval rain is different. It feels like the sky wants to unmake you. Your cloak helps, but only slightly. Mud clings to your boots with a love that borders on obsession. You finally stumble home, soaked and sour. Your mother clucks disapproval while handing you dry wool. It scratches like 1,000 tiny betrayals. Dinner is broth, mostly water, with optimistic traces of onion and maybe a single pea. You slurp it like it's royal cuisine. Your father tells a story, probably the same one as last week, about the time he fought off a bear with a broken rake. No one believes him, but no one stops him, either. His voice is comforting, even when his facts are suspicious. A knock at the door. That's rare. It's the reeve, the village official. He's collecting labor dues. Apparently, someone needs help fixing the Lord's fence tomorrow. Guess who volunteered? Spoiler. Not you. You grunt your acceptance and curse under your breath. But only softly. The reeve has ears like a fox and grudges like a dragon. You crawl into bed, sore and slightly damp despite your best drying efforts. Your straw mattress smells vaguely of mildew and adventure. Your sister mumbles in her sleep again. This time it's something about bees. Your mind wanders. About the world beyond. About ships and cities and silk from places you've only heard of in market songs. About whether you'll ever get to see anything more than cows, mud, and arguments over cheese. Probably not. But dreams are free. Your morning begins not with the usual rooster sermon, but with the squawk of geese. Angry geese. Somehow worse. You jolt awake to the sound of feathers flapping like 1,000 irritated fans. You barely remember yesterday's rain, except that your clothes are still damp and your boots smell like betrayal. The sky is low, gray, and undecided. It threatens more rain, but might just sulk all day. You grab a crust of bread, stale enough to be classified as a potential weapon, and chew with the enthusiasm of someone chewing bark. Breakfast is optional, working isn't. You head to the Lord's Manor with reluctant steps. It's not far, but it's a psychological marathon. The fence needs mending, not because it's useful, because it belongs to someone important. And that means it must look useful. You're not alone. Other villagers were invited, too. There's a baker's son, a shepherd girl, and that guy who always smells like onions no matter the season. He nods to you like a man preparing for battle. You nod back. Comrades in splinters. You grab a hammer. The handle is slick, the head loose. Perfect. The wood for the fence is damp and warps when you drive nails. You're fairly certain some of these nails were straight back when Rome was still a thing. As you work, you glance toward the manor house. It looms, stone, smug, and slightly mossy. The noble family isn't home today. Off hunting, apparently, probably with dogs that eat better than you. Still, the manor fascinates. You wonder what it's like inside. Are there cushions? Real beds? Do they have glass windows? Historians still argue whether most rural manor houses were truly luxurious or just relatively better than peasant homes. Evidence suggests many were surprisingly basic. But from your muddy boots, they may as well be palaces in the clouds. The steward checks your progress. He's the kind of man who frowns even when nothing's wrong. You smile too wide in response. He grunts and walks away. A win. You finish the fence after hours of splinter gathering and nail bending. The structure now stands upright-ish, held together by effort, hope, and 2 strategically placed stones. You step back. It's art, in a way. Payment? A cup of beer and some words that barely pass as thanks. You drink and try not to scowl. Heading home, you detour past the village green. There's excitement in the air. A troupe of traveling performers has arrived. Jugglers, musicians, a man with a dancing bear. Children shriek with joy. Adults pretend not to enjoy it. You drift toward the makeshift stage. A flute plays, lilting and wild. A dancer twirls, coins sewn into her dress clinking like cheerful rain. It's mesmerizing, and it makes you painfully aware of how dull your days usually are. A performer pulls you from the crowd for a trick. You protest, half-heartedly. He hands you a wooden cup and covers it with cloth. A few flourishes, a dramatic pause, and suddenly it's full of berries. You laugh. Real berries. You haven't tasted fresh fruit in weeks. He bows. You bow back. The crowd claps. For a moment, you're part of something magical. Then the bear sneezes and everyone screams. Later, at the tavern, the villagers gossip over weak ale. They argue about who's courting who, what the tax collector might do next, and whether the new priest is too clean. You sip slowly, letting the warmth seep in. A quirky tidbit floats your way. Someone claims a nearby town has a bridge made entirely of bones. You scoff. Then again, you once saw a man claim a fish told his fortune. Anything's possible. Back home, you help patch the roof. The thatch is loose. It leaks. You climb carefully, balancing like a goat with trust issues. A raven watches from a tree. You whisper, "Don't push me, just in case." That night, you sit by the fire. Your sister combs her hair with a bone comb. Your mother hums an old song. Tuneless but comforting. Your father carves something out of wood. No one knows what yet. Not even him. You talk about the performers. Your sister wants to dance like the woman in coins. Your brother wants to train a bear. You want to sleep for a week. But bedtime waits. You lie on your straw pile. The geese are quiet. The world is damp and tired. Like you. Outside, a dog howls. Maybe it saw the bone bridge. You wake to pain. Not the emotional kind, though that's always quietly humming beneath the surface, but the literal, full-body soreness that comes from sleeping on straw and spending your days impersonating a human ox. Every muscle is a passive-aggressive protest sign. There's no time to wallow. The entire village is stirring. A bell rings, not the church bell. This one's deeper, more urgent. Something's happening. You shuffle outside, feet numb and soul slightly damp. The reeve is standing in the square, holding a scroll like it's a holy relic. His face is solemn. That's never good. He reads aloud. A royal messenger is coming. Today. Cue the collective gasp. A royal messenger means taxes, or news of war, or a decree no one asked for, possibly involving turnips. Either way, you're expected to look presentable, which, in your case, means brushing off the worst of the hay and trying not to smell like boiled cabbage. The village scrambles. Children are herded, animals are leashed, and someone tries to reassemble the fence you fixed yesterday. It already collapsed. Historians still argue how involved royal authorities were in day-to-day peasant life during the Dark Ages. Some claim villages like yours operated almost autonomously, while others suggest that even the smallest hamlets felt the crown's distant grip through taxes, levies, and messengers like this one. Either way, today feels like the king himself is breathing down your neck. You're roped into decorating the square, which mostly means raking mud into slightly more appealing mud. You try to draw a smiley face with your rake. It's not appreciated. The messenger arrives just past noon, wearing a tunic that hasn't seen mud in weeks and riding a horse so clean it looks mythical. You wonder how much hay it eats in a day. Probably more than you do. He dismounts with the swagger of someone who's been inside an actual stone building, bows shallowly, and hands a letter to the reeve. Then he waits. For food, of course. A piglet is sacrificed for the occasion. Bread, cheese, and weak beer follow. The messenger eats like a man who's been roughing it for at least 3 hours. You resist the urge to ask if his shoes are made of actual leather or just the dreams of peasants. Once fed, he reads the letter aloud. It's not war. It's not taxes. It's something worse, a census. The king wants to know how many souls live in each village. Souls, livestock, plows, able-bodied men, babies, old folks, and even unusual anomalies. Whatever that means, you briefly wonder if you count as one. Everyone must present themselves to the reeve for counting. The line forms fast. You wait behind the shepherd girl again. She always seems one step ahead, and try not to panic. What if they think your house is too small? What if they decide you're not useful enough? What if someone brings up that one time you got stuck in a barrel? When it's your turn, the reeve asks questions like he's being paid per syllable. Name? You mumble it. Age? You guess. Occupation? You pause. Technically, you do everything. Today it's fence fixer / thatch enthusiast. He raises one eyebrow. You try to look dependable. Once counted, you're dismissed. You shuffle away, unsure if you've just been assessed for taxation or conscription. Later, you overhear the reeve muttering to the messenger about a shortfall in grain and unreported chickens. The messenger takes notes like a man who enjoys tattling professionally. You slip away to the orchard. It's your secret spot, where the apple trees grow gnarly and stubborn. Most of the fruit is long gone, but you find one half-rotten apple and eat around the mush. It's not gourmet, but it's yours. A breeze rustles the branches. You lie beneath them, staring up at a sky so flat and dull it might be painted in porridge. For a moment, time slows. Then a bee lands on your nose and the moment is ruined. You head back to the village, wiping apple juice and bee feelings from your face. Evening falls with a kind of hushed dread. The messenger leaves at dusk, but the tension lingers. Everyone feels it. Being noticed by the crown is like being noticed by a bear. Flattering in theory, disastrous in practice. Your father says it'll pass. Your mother isn't so sure. She sharpens her knives quietly, just in case. Dinner is barley gruel with hints of turnip. You eat mechanically, already planning your escape into dreams. Before bed, Your sister asks what a soul is. You try to explain, but end up rambling about ghosts and soup. That night, you dream of palaces made of cheese, scrolls that read themselves, and a messenger who trips over his own fancy boots. You wake up laughing, just a little, and then the rooster starts again. Your morning begins with a splash. Not the gentle trickle of spring water or even a poetic drip from the thatched roof, no. It's a pig, ankle deep in your wash basin. Looking completely unrepentant, you sigh, because of course today would start like this. The sky is gray again. Because the weather in your village comes in 3 moods: wet, damp, or about to be damp. You chase the pig out, but it leaves behind muddy water and an existential crisis. So you rinse your face with what's left and pretend it's refreshing. You tell yourself the Romans probably didn't bathe every day either. And they had aqueducts. Today is market day, not your market. Your village is too small and sad for one of those. No, you're going to the next village over, which does have a market. That means a rare, painful treat. Travel. It's not far, technically. Just a few miles down a rutted track lined with suspicious puddles and nettles that conspire against your ankles. You join a group of other villagers making the journey. Some carry baskets, others push carts. One man just carries a goose like it's a fashion statement. The walk begins with enthusiasm, but quickly degrades into mild complaining and a lot of heavy sighs. The mud is especially aggressive today. It's the kind that sucks at your boots like a hungry ghost. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant markets were thriving community hubs or more like glorified swap meets with occasional fistfights. Evidence suggests both. Today's market leans toward the latter. The first sign you're nearing it is the smell. A mix of livestock, unwashed humanity, old cheese, and desperation. Then come the sounds: shouting, bartering, a lute being tuned badly. You crest the final hill and see it, a chaotic sprawl of stalls, wagons, and hopeful shouting. You've arrived. Immediately, a man tries to sell you miracle garlic. You politely decline, but he follows you for 10 steps anyway. Another hawker offers an authentic Viking bone spoon. You're not sure how he verified the authenticity, but it definitely looks like a stick with ambition. Your task is simple. Trade 1 small sack of barley for as much as you can get. You'd love some dried fish, or maybe salt, or, dream big, a bit of actual honey. But bargaining is an art, and you are not an artist. You approach a stall with smoked eels and nod at the vendor like someone who definitely knows the going rate for eels. He squints. You squint back. It becomes a battle of wills. Eventually, you trade your barley for a string of eels and a tiny wedge of questionable cheese. Victory? Let's pretend. A quirky tidbit. Someone's selling hedgehog meat pies. Claims it's the new thing. You're both repelled and curious. You do not buy one. But you do watch someone else eat one. And the expression on their face haunts you. After securing your meager purchases, you wander. There's a puppet show for the children. But half the jokes are strangely political. A monk is preaching loudly on a crate about sin and pottage. You're not sure what the connection is, but he seems very convinced. At the far end of the market, there's a woman selling dyed wool. The colors are shockingly vivid, red like spilled wine, blue like bruises. You can't afford any, but you touch a piece when she's not looking. It's softer than your dreams. Nearby, a tinker repairs pots with a rhythm that could be music. You sit on a crate to watch him for a while, letting the noise of the market blur into the background. This is the most people you've seen in weeks. It's both exciting and exhausting. Everyone's busy pretending they're better off than they are. Everyone's a little hungry, a little tired, and a little suspicious of everyone else. You bump into the goose guy again. His goose now has a ribbon. The ribbon has glitter. You don't ask. By mid-afternoon, the clouds gather with intent. A few drops fall, then a few dozen. Then the sky simply gives up and pours. You scramble for shelter beneath a wagon, squashed between a barrel and a boy eating turnips like it's a dare. When the rain lets up, the market has thinned. People pack up, carts wobble away, and the lute player finally gives up. You begin the walk home, wet, eel-scented, and proud of your cheese. The road is worse now, slick and unsure of its own purpose. You slip twice, once into a puddle, once into shame. Back in the village, The fire's already lit, you hang your cloak by it, and the steam rising from it smells like damp and hope. Dinner is eel, obviously. Your mother fries it over the coals. It hisses, then sizzles, then quiets, like it's accepting its fate. Your family eats in silence. Not because it's sad, but because chewing eel is a full-time job. Before bed, you tell your sister about the dyed wool. She gasps. Your brother is still stuck on the hedgehog pies. Your father just grunts and says, "Used to be snake." You don't ask for clarification. That night, you dream of a market where everything is free and smells like apples. You wake up smiling, until you remember the pig. The pig is now sleeping in your bed. You blink twice, but no, still there, curled up like it owns the place, snoring like someone who doesn't know what taxes are. You sigh, because honestly, you're not even mad, just disappointed. You shoo it out gently, then more forcefully when it refuses. It grunts indignantly, as if you're the rude one. Finally, it trots off, leaving behind a mess that will haunt your nostrils until the next rainstorm. Or the next flood, whichever comes first. You begin your day with the barest wash and a piece of bread so stale it could double as roof tile. No butter. Butter is a luxury. Butter is for the reeve, the priest, and the two families in town who mysteriously always have butter. You suspect sorcery. You've been assigned to help repair the village mill today. This is exciting only in the way that being chosen for jury duty is exciting. You're honored. Yes, but also not entirely convinced it isn't a punishment. The mill's been acting up. The wheel sticks. The grindstone squeals. And sometimes it just stops, as if protesting the very idea of labor. So, you pack a meager lunch and trudge to the edge of the river where the mill sits. Looking tired and vaguely resentful. Like you, mill technology during the medieval period was surprisingly advanced. Many mills were water-powered, and some even had early forms of gears and cams. But here's the catch: they broke down. A lot, and without spare parts, or even the same definition of maintenance we have today. Fixing one usually meant yelling at it and hitting it with increasingly larger sticks. The miller greets you with a nod and a suspicious look. You're not entirely sure why he dislikes you. Maybe it was that one time you fell into the flour bin. Or the other time you sneezed mid-sack carry and covered him in grain. In any case, he points to the wheel and says, "It's jammed." You nod sagely, as if you have any idea what that means. You spend the next several hours soaked from splashing water, covered in algae, and being yelled at for standing like a stump. You move stones. You poke at wooden gears. At one point, you drop your lunch into the river. It floats away like a soggy metaphor. A quirky tidbit. The miller insists on carrying a pouch of mill dust for luck. He rubs some on the axle and mutters a rhyme. You're 90% sure it's nonsense. But when the wheel groans to life afterward, you begin to wonder, maybe ghosts do help. By midday, the wheel is turning again, slowly, hesitantly, like a child doing chores. The miller grunts approval and hands you a small sack of flour as thanks. It's the closest thing to currency you've earned in weeks. You carry it home like treasure. Historians still debate whether millers were beloved community figures or resented middlemen. There's evidence for both. Some were vital providers of bread, flour, and community news, while others were accused of skimming extra grain or using unfair measurements. Yours is somewhere in the middle, a bit of a grump, but fair enough to let you leave with your dignity, mostly intact. Back in the village, something's amiss. The square is too quiet. People are whispering. You spot a small crowd gathered near the well. You edge closer. Sack of flour forgotten. Someone's missing. A shepherd boy, barely more than a child, never came home last night. His flock returned without him, which is always a bad sign. The villagers are murmuring, trading theories that range from wolves to forest spirits to simple mischief gone wrong. You listen, heart sinking. Suddenly, you're back in that feeling. That cold pit of dread that settles in your gut when something breaks the daily rhythm. This world is many things: muddy, smelly, occasionally hilarious, but predictable. When someone disappears, it cracks the surface. A search party is forming. You join without hesitation. Despite your soggy boots and aching back, you grab a torch and follow the group out past the village edge. Into the woods. The forest is quiet, too quiet. You walk in lines, calling his name. The torchlight dances across gnarled trunks and undergrowth that seems to breathe. Every sound feels exaggerated. The snap of a twig, the hoot of an owl, your own breath. You find nothing, but you feel something. You're not alone out here. Maybe it's just the trees playing tricks. Maybe not. Historians still argue how deeply medieval villagers believed in forest spirits, fae, and other unseen forces. But to someone like you, raised on whispered tales and suspicious mushrooms, the line between superstition and survival feels very thin. Eventually, the search is called off for the night. You return to the village, eyes darting at every shadow. The fire in the common house feels especially warm, and you're especially grateful. You hold your flower like a child might hold a doll. At dinner, no one talks much. Your father mutters about wolves. Your mother mutters about worse than wolves. Your brother wants to know if ghosts can bleed. You do not sleep well, but you do sleep, and in your dreams, the mill turns smoothly, spinning stories into grain and shadows into flour. You dream of lost boys who are found, of forests that give back, of pigs that stay in their own beds. When morning comes, it's raining again. Of course it is. You wake up to bells. Not the soft, melodious kind that float on the breeze. These are panic bells, clanging wildly from the church tower like a drunk blacksmith trying to forge anxiety itself. You sit up so fast you smack your head on the low ceiling. The pig, alarmed, oinks and bolts out the door. You're not far behind. Outside, the village is already stirring, people shouting, running toward the common square. Half-dressed, muddy-footed, someone's yelling something about the reeve, which, frankly, can't ever be good. You follow the current of alarm until you reach the center of it all. There, near the well, stands the reeve, or rather, his absence stands there, his cottage door wide open, the inside ransacked, and no reeve in sight. Now, let's be clear, the reeve is not exactly beloved. He's the local estate manager, a kind of glorified hall monitor for the lord's estate. But he's also the one who settles disputes, handles tax collection, and knows which cow belongs to whom. Without him, things unravel fast. Historians still argue whether the reeve was more of a bureaucratic tool or an enforcer of village justice. You've known reeves who were decent, and others who would fine you for breathing too enthusiastically. Yours? Let's call him, efficiently unpleasant. The village is buzzing. Some believe he ran off with tax money. Others say it's a plot by the neighboring village. A few whisper of bandits. Or worse, retaliation by forest spirits for yesterday's search party. No one says it out loud, but everyone's thinking it. The priest tries to calm the crowd. It doesn't work. He's still wearing his nightcap, and his sermon sounds more like a lullaby. By midday, 3 men and 1 regrettably sober woman are declared the temporary council. You're not chosen, which is fine. You've had enough drama for 1 eel-scented lifetime. But here's the thing. Without the reeve, rules are fuzzy. And fuzzy rules in a medieval village are like fuzzy socks in a swamp, useless, soggy, and likely to cause infection. You start to notice the cracks by the afternoon. 2 boys are openly fighting over a loaf of bread. An old woman claims the empty reeve's cottage as her new apothecary, complete with dried weeds and suspicious jars. A pig is inside the chapel. Again. By evening, someone's lit a bonfire and started singing. That might sound charming, except it's Wednesday, and singing is strictly reserved for saints' days. You hear the priest sobbing softly into his ale. Now, let's talk about village justice. It's not Lady Justice with a blindfold and scales. It's more 3 people shouting while a goat eats the evidence. Punishments vary wildly depending on the offense, the mood of the day, and whether the accused has chickens to bribe the council. Forget about legal rights. You steal a chicken? You're lashed. You insult a monk? Stocks for a week. You accidentally let your pig into the chapel? You spend the next morning shoveling pig things out of holy places. Which is how you find yourself. Reluctantly, with a shovel. The pig incident was technically not your fault. But no one wants to hear about the nuances of porcine autonomy. So you scoop and mutter. The chapel's stained glass glaring at you with judgmental saints who've never stepped in what you're stepping in now. A quirky tidbit. There's a village truth chair made entirely of nettles. It's rarely used, but exists as a threat. You've never seen it in action. You never want to. The idea is you sit on it until you confess. Or pass out, whichever comes first. As the week drags on, the reeve remains missing, and the village frays further. Crops are neglected. People start claiming others' chickens with a boldness that borders on performance art. Someone tries to tax the well water. You're not even sure who gave them that authority. You try to stay out of it. Focus on useful things. Mending a fence. Fishing, poorly. Scraping lichen off the north side of your cottage. Because apparently that's a thing now. But then, the situation escalates. A merchant arrives. He's not from your village. He's from the outside. A man with boots too clean, eyes too sharp, and a cart full of shiny things. He's got salt. He's got spices. He's got ribbons, actual, colorful, not made of damp string ribbons. Everyone flocks to him like he's a saint who smells like cinnamon. But he demands coin, or grain, or honey, things your village is rapidly losing control over. When 3 villagers try to barter with questionable mushrooms, he laughs. You do not like his laugh. By nightfall, he's moved on, but not before sowing discontent like a fashionable plague. Now everyone's suddenly aware of how little they have, how fragile their food stores are, how dependent they are on a system that's, well, missing a reeve. Tensions rise. Arguments flare over land boundaries. Someone gets pushed into the well, don't worry. Just bruises and pride. The priest declares a fast. No one listens. The pig returns to the chapel. It's starting to feel intentional. Historians still debate how much self-governance medieval villages truly had in the absence of appointed officials. Some believe they functioned reasonably through custom and kinship. Others suggest chaos was never more than a meal away. You're now firmly in the chaos camp. Eventually, word reaches the village. The Lord is sending a new reeve. This causes both relief and panic. Relief, because someone will restore order. Panic, because it might be someone worse. You hear rumors, wild ones, about this new reeve. That he has one eye. That he rides a horse backward. That he fines people for sneezing. Honestly, in this world, all of that sounds plausible. The day of his arrival, the village is on edge. People clean. Brooms come out. The chapel is pig-free. You even wash your face. Twice. And then, he arrives. He's tall, silent. His horse is normal. Disappointingly. But his presence is not. He speaks few words. But when he does, people listen. He inspects the fields, the mill, the market square. He takes notes. You didn't even know Reeves took notes. It feels deeply unsettling. He posts a new rule sheet on the chapel door. It's written in Latin, of course, so no one can read it. But it's very neat. By nightfall, you're summoned, along with a dozen others, to explain the pig incident. Again, you stand in front of him, shifting awkwardly, while a scribe records your every and ah. You try to blame the wind. He raises an eyebrow. You try to blame the pig. He raises the other eyebrow. You leave with a warning. And the scribe gives you a tiny nod of sympathy. Order slowly returns. Sort of. But something's changed. You've seen how close to the edge everything really is. How one missing man can shift the balance from routine to riot. And now, when you pass the chapel, you swear the pig is watching you. That night, your dreams are strange. You dream of nettle chairs and salt merchants with foxtails. Of a reeve who turns into a crow. Of villagers arguing in rhyme. You dream of justice, twisted and knotted like the ropes that hold up the stalks. And in the distance, always, the sound of bells. Rain. Again. Of course. You're not even surprised anymore. It's the kind of steady drizzle that doesn't pour or thunder, it just exists. Like a low-level curse or a song stuck in your head, you wrap your cloak tighter and step outside, where mud squelches underfoot with the enthusiasm of a toddler in a bath. The new reeve, the stern one with the eyebrows, has begun reforms. He's posted 3 new proclamations on the chapel door, again, all in Latin. You're tempted to ask the priest for a translation, but he just shrugs and offers you a boiled turnip, which is either hospitality or a coded threat. You decline. Soon, word spreads. Today is Labor Reassessment Day. That's right, you, dear villager, are about to be told what you're actually good for. Medieval manorial systems revolved around assigned labor. You might think you're a talented thatcher, but the Lord's steward thinks you're better suited to ditch repair. And just like that, your life changes. Forever. Because ditches are eternal. The villagers gather in the square. The reeve stands atop a cart, calling names and tasks in a voice like gravel being stirred in broth. When yours comes up, he pauses. You hold your breath. Field work, he says. You exhale. Could be worse. You could have gotten latrine maintenance or rat inspection. Both are real jobs. Both are worse than they sound. You're assigned to a small stretch of barley fields on the western edge of the village. Near the woods, the land is uneven, and the furrows look more like battle scars than rows. But it's land, and it's yours, for now. As you start your new role, you meet the field overseer, a woman named Agnes. She's wiry, sun-baked, and smiles like someone who's seen too much. She hands you a hoe and points at the earth. Make it less lumpy, she says. You get to work. Now, here's the thing about medieval agriculture, it's relentless. You rise with the sun, and if you're lucky, you rest at sunset. Most crops are grown using a three-field system, meaning 1/3 of the land lies fallow. Another grows a winter crop, and another a spring crop. Your patch? Spring barley. Which sounds cheerful. It's not. A mainstream historical fact. Yields in medieval times were astonishingly low by modern standards. A good harvest might yield 4 or 5 grains for every one planted. Bad years? You just hope your neighbors are too weak to steal your turnips. You dig, you hoe, you try to make the ground less lumpy, which turns out to be an art form, like sculpting, but with sweat and dirt and existential dread. And then you hear it, a distant shout. You stand, squinting through the rain. Another shout. Agnes drops her hoe. Boar, she says, not excitedly. You blink. Wild boar? She doesn't answer. She's already running. You follow. Partly because you're curious. Mostly because you don't want to be the second person eaten. A group of villagers are gathered near the edge of the woods. They point, and there it is. A wild boar. Massive. Mud-caked. Eyes like beady little sins. It roots around the field like it owns the place. Which, for the moment, it does. Someone suggests throwing rocks. Another suggests prayer. A third, clearly an optimist, suggests taming it and keeping it as a pet. That man is quickly voted off the strategy committee. Eventually, a plan is formed. Scare it off with noise. This involves banging pots, yelling, and someone playing a flute badly enough that the boar does in fact flee, probably from aesthetic disgust. Crisis averted. You return to work, but now the fields feel different. Wary, as if nature itself resents your presence. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval villages had boar festivals where hunters would reenact great chases. Sometimes using puppets, sometimes using actual boars. The results were either wildly entertaining or deeply scarring, depending on how quickly the ropes broke. Back in the village, you rest your sore arms and try to remember what clean fingernails feel like. Spoiler. You can't. You eat a stew that might be turnip, might be onion, might be regret. Then the messenger arrives. He's from the manor. No one likes messengers. They bring news, yes, but also demands, taxes, decrees, lists of things the Lord suddenly wants, like tithes, or 3 rabbits by moonrise, or a medieval version of a strongly worded email. This messenger, however, brings something different. He's recruiting soldiers. You blink. War? Not quite, but the borderlands need reinforcing. And the Lord is, generously, seeking volunteers to serve 3 months in exchange for tax reduction and glory. And maybe shoes. You're not sure. The parchment is smudged. Historians still argue whether such short-term levies were truly voluntary. On paper, yes. In practice, say no and you might find your barley field reassigned to someone with fewer opinions. The village buzzes. Some men laugh it off. Others grow quiet. One immediately begins sharpening a spoon into a weapon. You're not sure what to think. You've just gotten used to hoeing. That night, you sit around the hearth, weighing options. Field work is hard, dangerous, even. But war? War is unpredictable. And worse, far away. You've never been more than 10 miles from the village. The idea of marching to the borderlands sounds as surreal as flying. Your mother begs you not to volunteer. Your brother begs you to. He wants your boots. The pig, unhelpfully, eats the recruitment scroll. You don't sleep well. In your dreams, the barley fields stretch endlessly. The boar watches from the edge. The messenger's voice echoes with strange words. And everywhere, the sound of marching feet. Come morning, 5 villagers have stepped forward to join the levy. You are not among them. Not yet. You return to your field. The furrows are still there. The lumpy soil. The faint smell of rain and churned earth. But it feels different now. Like the land is watching you back. Agnes walks past and pats your shoulder. War'll still be there tomorrow, she says. And she's right. So you dig, and wonder how much longer you can live a life measured in clumps of mud. Hooves in the distance, and barley that may or may not grow. It's surprising how fast peace can feel like a fragile thing. 1 minute you're ankle deep in barley fields, wondering if you'll ever stop smelling like damp wool and root vegetables. The next, you're learning how to patch a gambeson with boar gut and wondering how many of your teeth will still be in your head come winter. Because yes, you decided to enlist. You didn't mean to. You'd told yourself no. You told everyone no. But then the messenger returned. And the reeve whispered something about favorable impressions, and preferential harvest plots, and you don't want the steward mad at you. Do you? And so now, you're a soldier. Well, almost. You're a levy, which is like being a soldier, but with less respect and more mud in your ears. The village sends off its proud 3 men. A woman with arms like tree trunks. And you, trying not to look terrified as you wave goodbye to Agnes and her furrows. They issue you gear at the next manor. If you were expecting a shining sword and chainmail, prepare to lower your expectations directly into the ground. You get a padded tunic that smells like old soup. A wooden spear, slightly warped, with one side splintering. A small shield shaped like a teardrop. Fitting. And boots. That part is nice. You immediately get a blister. But hey, at least now your feet are blistered inside something. You train with the others in a field surrounded by low stone walls and bored sheep. The instructor is a former mercenary with a nose broken so many times it now points at your elbow when he looks at your face. He teaches you how to thrust, how to shield bash, and how to not accidentally stab your own allies. You're adequate. A mainstream historical fact. Most medieval levies received very little formal training. Some spent just a week drilling before marching to the front. They were expected to follow orders, hold formation, and die quietly. You eat rough bread, dried peas, and something they call march stew, which appears to be lard with ambitions. You sleep on hay, wake with a cough, and develop a close, antagonistic friendship with the local geese, who clearly view you as trespassing scum. One morning, the instructor yells, "Today, mock battle." You line up with the others, feeling slightly heroic. Then you get hit in the leg by a practice club wielded by Bertha, the tree trunk armed woman, and fall over screaming. She apologizes. Kind of. The instructor grunts. Better to fall now than in the field. You limp for the rest of the week. At night, you listen to the veterans talk. They speak of skirmishes in border towns, of looters, of noble knights riding past like painted gods. Ignoring the muddy foot soldiers as if they were scenery, they talk of hunger, and frostbite, and friends who didn't come home. Historians still argue whether medieval levies truly mattered in battle, or were just numbers to bulk up a lord's pride. But on the field, every spear counts, especially when the other side is bigger, louder, and riding horses. Then, one dawn, it happens. You march. The levy is summoned, not to a grand campaign, but to a border village beset by bandits, former soldiers turned thieves. Driven by hunger, madness, or boredom, your troop joins a cluster of others, forming a small, scrappy force under the banner of Lord Ulrich the Unenthusiastic. He doesn't say that's his name, of course, but he greets you with a yawn, and his horse sneezes on your face. You march through wet woods, past crooked huts, over narrow bridges made of wobbly planks. You learn the rhythm of the levy march: trudge, slip, swear softly, repeat. Your shield thumps against your hip in time with your blisters. Then you see the village, or what's left of it, charred timbers, slaughtered livestock, a single wheelbarrow in the road, its load of turnips spilled like someone dropped the world's saddest groceries. You take position behind a crumbling wall. The commander, no, not Ulrich, he's busy napping, gives the signal. You wait. Then, figures appear in the tree line. At first, they look like ghosts, shrouded in mist, faces hidden. They don't march in formation. They slink. They scatter. They're fast. The first arrow lands in the dirt beside your foot. You don't scream. You just reevaluate every life decision you've ever made. Then the battle begins. You don't remember all of it. Just flashes. Someone yelling in a language you don't know. The sharp crack of wood against bone. The horrible moment your spear lodges in a man's side and stays there. He screams. You scream. Then you run. No one tells you what to do when your only weapon is stuck in someone else. You hide behind Bertha, who is single-handedly repelling 3 bandits and yelling something about her grandmother's goat. Eventually, the raiders scatter. The levee holds. Barely. You sit in the mud, trembling, unable to tell if the red on your hands is blood or mud or both. Probably both. You don't sleep that night. Neither does anyone else. You count the missing faces in the morning. 3 from your village, 1 from another. The priest comes and says prayers. You just watch the fire burn the bandits' bodies and try not to vomit. A quirky tidbit. Some soldiers carried death tokens, small bits of cloth embroidered with prayers, meant to be buried with them in case of a hasty funeral. You find one in a fallen bandit's pocket. It's shaped like a cat. After that, your levee service feels heavier. The next weeks are spent patrolling nearby roads, helping rebuild the village, burying the dead. You learn how to skin a rabbit badly. You learn that if you soak your feet in ash water, they blister less. You learn that death smells like wet leather and onions. Eventually, your time ends. Lord Ulrich, between yawns, signs your parchment and pats your shoulder like a man blessing a chair. You walk home. No horses for levies, just your feet, and your new limp, and your memory, trailing behind you like a second shadow. When you finally see your village, those familiar chimney smokes, the bend in the river, you almost cry. Agnes is still in the field. She looks up, sees you. Thought you'd be taller, she says. You grin. You're home. But you are not the same. The reeve nods at you with new respect. The steward gives you a better patch of land. The children point at your scar. You say it's from a sword. But really it was a bush. You sleep in your own hay now. Eat your own stew. Listen to your own pig snore beside the hearth. And when the messenger returns months later, holding another levee scroll, you do not hesitate. No, you say. Firm. Final. You've had enough of glory. You've earned your barley. Back on the farm. That sounds romantic until you realize, farm is just code for mud with responsibilities. You wake up to a rooster with unresolved rage issues. It pecks your boot as you shuffle toward the door, and you consider retaliating with a turnip. But restraint is part of maturity. Also, you need that rooster to lay eggs. Yes, you remember, roosters don't lay eggs. You're tired, okay? The first morning back feels like visiting your past life. The tools are where you left them. More or less, the field still remembers your footsteps. Agnes waves at you from across the barley rows. You think you see her smirk. It could be wind. You grab your hoe. Again, there's comfort in repetition, right? But something's changed. You've changed. Your arms, once calloused from digging, are now calloused from spear training. You move differently, more cautious, more deliberate, and when you see the furrows again, you don't just see dirt. You see shelter, stability, a life where the only thing charging at you might be a hungry goat. Still, the work doesn't get easier. In fact, it might be harder now. Because you know what else is out there. You know the noise of battle. You've seen people die, and you've seen people live badly, in ways that make barley look like a miracle. One day, a child comes up to you while you're washing your hands in the stream. Did you kill anyone? They ask. You freeze. Historians still argue whether common soldiers shared stories of battle with their villages or kept silent from trauma and shame. You understand why. You look at the child. Mud on their cheeks. A wooden sword in their hand. You shake your head slowly. I fought. You say. But I'm here to grow things. They nod. Serious. I want to grow things too. The next few weeks blur together in a comforting fog of fieldwork and familiar voices. You help Agnes repair a fence. You rescue a lamb stuck in a ditch. You even try teaching the children some of the spear drills you learned, mostly as a game. Bertha visits once and shows off her new scar. The children love her. You do too, though you'd never say it out loud. Then something new arrives in the village. Something big. Something made of glass. A merchant. Not the usual traveling peddler with rusted pots and vaguely cursed trinkets. No, this one has a cart full of shining things, mirrors, colored beads, glass goblets that catch the light like trapped rainbows. You stare at a goblet for a full minute before remembering to breathe. A mainstream historical fact, glass was rare and expensive in medieval Europe. Most commoners never saw it, let alone owned it. A simple glass cup could cost more than a cow. The merchant sets up shop near the chapel. The villagers crowd around, bartering eggs, cloth, tools, anything. You offer him a carved button. He snorts and says he's more interested in stories. Stories? You ask. He leans in. I've been to cities. People there pay good coin for tales of heroism and hardship. Bandit battles, boar attacks, levy boys who come home changed. He's looking right at you. You blink. No thanks. You say. He shrugs and sells your neighbor a broken lantern for half a hen. That night, you think about it. The idea of your story being passed from city to city. Embroidered and exaggerated. Maybe one day some barmaid in a smoky tavern will say, "Did you hear the one about the muddy levy who stabbed a man with a turnip?" You kind of like that idea. A quirky tidbit. In some medieval taverns, travelers could pay for lodging or food with a song or a story. Especially if the host was bored or drunk enough. You imagine yourself standing on a table, pantomiming your pig snoring louder than the enemy horn. But no, you're not ready for that. Not yet. Instead, you visit the chapel. It's simple. Wooden beams, faded icons, a roof that leaks like a philosophical metaphor. You kneel, not to pray, really, just to be quiet. The priest notices you. He says nothing, just lights a candle and places it near your elbow. You sit together, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Eventually, he speaks. You came back. You nod. Not everyone does. You nod again. He doesn't ask more. Later that week, you receive a surprise. A letter. Well, technically, it's a parchment with something scrawled across it that might be words. The village clerk reads it aloud. Bertha. She's joined a mercenary group heading south. Says hello. Says she still has your spear, the good one. Says you'd better be growing more than just barley. Wink wink. You laugh for the first time in days. Agnes overhears. Was it the wink wink part? You pretend not to hear her. As summer rolls in, the village begins preparing for harvest. There's tension in the air, not fear. Exactly, but anticipation. If the crop fails, it's hunger. If it succeeds, it's celebration. Either way, everything rides on the weather, the soil, and the goats not getting creative again. One night, a thunderstorm rolls through. You and your neighbors scramble to secure tools, cover seedlings, herd the animals. A tree is struck just outside the village. Splinters fly like angry pixies. The chapel bell rings once. Unasked, you lie awake, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. 3, 4, boom. And then you dream. Not of war, not of mud. You dream of glass. Clear, fragile, impossible. It shatters in your hands. And you laugh, because somehow it becomes barley again. A week later, the reeve gathers everyone. He announces a census. Groans ripple through the crowd. No one likes the census. It means taxes. It means reevaluations. It means the steward comes sniffing around. You line up anyway. He asks your name, your age, whether your pig is still alive. Yes, barely. Then, occupation? You hesitate. Farmer, you say. Then, former levy. He nods. He writes something on the parchment that you don't see. You walk away feeling heavier, or maybe lighter. It's hard to tell. Historians still argue whether such classifications improved the lot of peasants or just reinforced their limitations. You suspect both. But that night, you take your old spear, Bertha's original. cracked but reliable, and planted in the ground near your field. Like a marker, not a grave, a memory, something that says, you were there, you came back, and you chose this, you chose home, you chose barley, you chose to keep growing, even if the field is lumpy, even if the rooster hates you, even if the glass is gone. So, naturally, just when things start to feel normal again, the church ruins it. A monk arrives from the nearby abbey, robes flapping like sails, and announces with the joyless tone of someone who hasn't smiled since the last eclipse. The relic is missing. You blink. The relic? You didn't know your village had a relic. Most people are still unclear whether it's a fingerbone or just a well-preserved chicken toe. Apparently, it's a holy fragment of Saint somebody. The specifics are vague. But the monk insists it's been watching over the region for generations. And now it's gone, stolen, disappeared, vanished like the last loaf of bread when Bertha was around. Of course, everyone immediately suspects everyone else. Agnes blames the merchant. The reeve blames the kids. The kids blame the goats. And honestly, based on past behavior, it's not a completely absurd theory. You're dragged into the matter because, well, you're experienced, you've traveled, you've seen the world, you once stood within spitting distance of a bishop. Clearly, this qualifies you to investigate missing divine chicken toes. So now you're a detective. And it gets weirder. Because the monk offers indulgences, actual documents of forgiveness, for anyone who can find or return the relic. Which means this situation now involves heaven points. The stakes have never been higher. A mainstream historical fact, during the Middle Ages, indulgences were granted by the church as a way to reduce punishment for sins. By the 13th century, they were sometimes used as rewards. Even currency. No pressure. You begin questioning villagers, one awkward conversation at a time. First stop, the merchant. He snorts when you mention the relic and assures you he only deals in real treasures. Like glass goblets and mirrors that don't reflect anything useful. You press him, just a little. He pulls out a wrapped bundle and dramatically unveils a dried eel. It's not holy, he shrugs, but it's chewy. He's ruled out. Next, the children. They admit to touching the relic once. It smelled like old shoes, but swear they didn't take it. You believe them, mostly because they're busy building a castle out of manure bricks and would have lost the relic in 2 minutes flat. Then Agnes. She glares at you like you accused her of stealing your dreams. Why would I take it? She asks. I don't even believe in toe bones. But she does mention something curious, strange footprints near the chapel. Bare feet, adult-sized, headed toward the forest. You investigate. The tracks are faint, half washed away by last night's rain. But they're there. You follow them past the stream, through brambles, to a hollow tree you once used for hiding from chores. Inside? Nothing. Well, not nothing. There's a single thread of fabric caught on a knot of wood. Red, fine woven, not local. You return with the cloth. The monk examines it and nods gravely. Heretic colors, he whispers. Of course, because things weren't dramatic enough. Now the entire village is on edge. Everyone's looking over their shoulder, half expecting a band of heretics to swoop in wearing matching tunics. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly feared heretics as much as bandits, or whether it was more a convenient political excuse for the church to flex control. Either way, you're now on high alert for suspicious tailoring. And then, just as the village tension reaches a rolling boil, a shepherd finds the relic. Under his sheep. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apparently, the sheep knocked it over during a thunderstorm and used it as a pillow. The relic is unharmed but now smells very strongly of lanolin. The monk is horrified. The villagers are relieved. The reeve organizes a celebration, because any excuse to drink watered-down ale counts as a festival. You sit on a fence post and stare at the relic as it's paraded past. Rue wrapped in velvet and incense. You can't help it, you laugh. Because somehow, after all you've seen, after bandits and levy marches and spear drills in barley fields, the thing that caused the most panic was a toe. A quirky tidbit. Some relics in the medieval period were entirely made up. Pilgrims traveled miles to venerate what turned out to be chicken bones, pottery shards, or pieces of random rocks. But belief made them powerful. That night, you dream of sheep guarding ancient treasures. You wake up smiling. Then it rains. Like, a lot. The kind of rain that turns fields into pudding and sends pigs squealing into high ground. The chapel leaks. The barn leaks. Your socks definitely leak. The harvest is in danger. This is bad. The entire village scrambles to protect the crop. Tools fly. Barrels are upended. Someone tries to build a drainage canal using spoons. You're not proud to admit it was you. Despite the chaos, something shifts. You see people working together, truly together, for the first time since you returned. The kids hauling sacks, Agnes patching roofs. Even the goats stop headbutting things for like 10 minutes. Miraculous. And just like that, the clouds pass. The sun returns. You step outside into a world washed clean. The fields survive. The barley lives. And so, oddly, do you. You help with the actual harvest, scything, binding, stacking. The rhythm is soothing, almost meditative. You hum old marching songs under your breath. The children copy you, terribly. It becomes a game. Then the miller arrives. You'd almost forgotten about him. Tall, smug, and very protective of his hat. The miller runs the water-powered grindstone outside the village. He demands his cut of the grain, his banal right. Basically, you're forced to use his mill, and he takes a slice for the privilege. A mainstream historical fact. Lords and their appointed millers often held monopolies on tools like mills, ovens, or wine presses. Peasants couldn't legally grind their own grain or bake their own bread without paying for the right. Naturally, everyone hates the miller. You try to be polite, until he insults your sacks. These knots, he sniffs, are the work of an untrained hand. You consider hitting him with a sheaf of wheat. Instead, you take a breath and ask about Bertha. Because, surprise, the miller used to know her. Terrible singer, he says. Good with dice. You smile. He doesn't. The grain is processed. The flour is bagged. And the bread begins. Yes, the bread. Dense, crusty, occasionally includes small stones. But it's yours. Harvest festival time. The village lights torches. Children dance around a haystack. The reeve makes a speech no one listens to. You find yourself next to Agnes. She offers you an apple. It's worm-free. This is probably love. Do you think we'll ever leave again? She asks. You look around. At the torches. The mud. The chapel with its now secured relic. And you say, not tonight. She laughs. The stars come out. And for once, they don't feel so far away. You wake to frost. Not a blizzard. Not a storm. Just that first delicate crust of silver on the barley stubble and along the edge of your boot. It catches the sunrise like a promise and a warning. Winter is coming. And it doesn't care how good your harvest festival was. You sit up slowly, joints creaking in a way that feels entirely unjust for your age. But months of hauling grain, building ditches, chasing rogue goats, and one regrettable backflip attempt during the Midsummer Games have taken their toll. And now, the rhythm shifts again. The fields sleep. The sun yawns late and turns in early. People retreat into houses, huddle near hearths, and tell stories that get wilder with every retelling. No, seriously, the sheep swallowed the relic whole. But you're not done yet. Winter prep is its own war. The roof leaks again. Of course it does, and you're up there before breakfast, stuffing moss between the beams like medieval insulation. Agnes throws you up a bundle. You miss. It hits the rooster. You suspect that was deliberate. Inside, you make space. Dry herbs hang from beams like forest chandeliers. You bury turnips in a pit lined with straw and hope the rats show some restraint this year. You patch your one good cloak using bits of 3 other cloaks. The result is hideous but warm. Still, food is short. It always is. The harvest was decent, but taxes took a chunk. The miller took more. And now you're counting barley kernels like they're gold coins. A mainstream historical fact. In the medieval period, the famine months often began in late winter, when stored food dwindled and spring crops hadn't yet grown. Starvation was a slow, familiar guest. You start trading. You give the smith your last dried apple slices in exchange for an iron needle. You give the shepherd a woven pouch for wool scraps. You try to give the Reeve your extra turnip. But he says, if I see one more turnip, I'll scream. Fair enough. Your boots crack from cold. So you visit the cobbler. And, surprise, the cobbler has stories. Apparently, he once apprenticed in a city. Back before plague closed the gates. He saw tall buildings, painted glass, a knight pass out drunk in a fountain shaped like a dragon. But it's not the tales that surprise you, it's the shoes. Because he makes you a pair. Real ones, thick leather, fur-lined, ugly as sin but glorious on your feet. How much, you ask? He just shrugs. Call it a barter for that time you helped me fix the well. You blink. You forgot about the well. He didn't. Historians still argue whether mutual aid in medieval villages was driven by genuine care or simply survival-based cooperation. But sometimes a gesture speaks louder than theory. You walk home warm for the first time in days. And then, the visit. The steward returns. You hear his horse before you see him. Clop, clop, clop. Like taxes incarnate. He's wearing fur and frustration. His clerk carries scrolls. They both look like they smell faintly of disappointment. Census check. The steward says. Also, new levies. Your stomach drops. Not again. The Reeve explains, quickly, quietly, that this one's a light muster. Just to show numbers. No marching. No war. Not yet. You report for duty anyway. They check your name, your spear hand, your remaining teeth. Still there. Thank you very much. And then the steward says, still farming? You nod. He writes something. Then, you'll be sent a writ of exemption. You've served already. You blink. I'm out? He grunts. If the crown agrees. Depends how cold it gets. And with that, he rides off, as charming as a brick. A quirky tidbit. Sometimes medieval peasants could buy their way out of levy service, or be exempted after prior campaigns. But it was never guaranteed. The rules bent with the wind, or the mood of whoever held the pen. Still, the promise lingers. You might never have to go back. You walk home slower this time, as if something heavy just rolled off your shoulders. That night, you tell Agnes. She nods. Good, we need you here. And that's the first time she's said, we. A few weeks pass. Snow falls. The goats hate it. You, oddly, don't. Because winter brings something strange. Stillness. Days without digging. Nights without alarms. Even the children quiet down. Just a little, as snow hushes the world like a woolen blanket. You mend tools by firelight. You reread an old parchment Bertha gave you once, with scribbled notes in the margin. Remember. Stab up, not down. Also, duck. You start carving again. Not for weapons, just for fun. A tiny horse. A spoon. A chicken that looks absolutely nothing like a chicken. But the kids love it anyway. Then comes wassail night. Agnes explains it's an old tradition. Walk from house to house. Sing at the orchards. Bless the trees. Keep the spirits happy. Keep the cider flowing. You're skeptical. But cider is mentioned. So you go. And you find yourself, hours later, standing under an ancient tree, holding hands with half the village, singing a song that probably predates logic. It's cold, ridiculous, beautiful. You yell, wassail, and throw toast into a tree. Because why not? A mainstream historical fact. The tradition of wassailing, blessing apple trees with song and drink, was practiced in parts of England to ensure good harvests. The act of offering toast-soaked cider to the roots was both ritual and probably rat snack. On your way home, Agnes slips her hand into yours. You don't say anything. Neither does she. The snow glows under moonlight. You hear the distant baa of a sheep that has somehow climbed onto the chapel roof again. Everything feels exactly right. Until, of course, the fire. It starts in the smith's hut. A spark. A forgotten ember. It catches the thatch. Wind does the rest. You wake to screams. You grab your cloak, your bucket, your legs. Half the village is already out, passing water, shoveling snow, flailing wildly. You join in. The fire eats roofs like parchment. Smoke claws your eyes. The heat is sharp enough to cut. But you keep going. And eventually, you win. The smith's house is gone. So is the neighbor's shed. But the rest stands. And no one dies. In the morning, You're covered in soot. Your eyebrows are crispier than they should be. But the village is alive. You help rebuild. Of course you do. Because now you know what it's like to lose. And to keep going. A week later, the steward's clerk returns. He hands you a sealed scroll. You open it. Inside. Your exemption. Official. Signed. You're free. No more levies. No more battles. You show Agnes. She reads it twice. Then she says, "So, what'll we do with all this barley?" And you smile. Because somehow, impossibly, there is a future here. With barley, with soot, with cider, with toast in trees, and maybe, just maybe, with peace. The thaw begins with a drip. Tiny at first. One hesitant droplet falling from the eaves of your house. Landing squarely on your forehead as you step outside to check on the firewood. Nature's personal greeting. You grumble, wipe your brow, and squint into the soft gray dawn. You made it. Winter is wobbling its way out. Like a guest who overstayed their welcome and drank all the cider. The ground is still hard in places. The trees still skeletal, but something has shifted. A scent in the air. A certain brightness to the clouds. A suggestion of mud. Spring is coming, and you've never been so excited to get filthy. But don't mistake this for leisure. No, spring is a season of frantic preparation. Because now the village has to undo all the cozy, frozen stalling and leap into planting mode, before nature runs away again. You grab your spade, and promptly step into a puddle. Of course, it's the first of many. The earth is a swamp. The fields resemble porridge. Your boots sink. Agnes laughs. You consider throwing your spade into the sun. And yet, it begins. The plow is dug out of storage. Its wooden blades warped by frost. You and 3 others take turns pulling it like oxen. Because the actual ox is pregnant, cranky, and refusing to move. Fields are scratched open like old parchment. Seeds are flung in with more hope than precision. You scatter barley, wheat, rye, even a few beans. You talk to them as you do it. Everyone does. Because superstition is just psychology with better outfits. A mainstream historical fact. Crop planting was often timed with feast days or moon cycles. Believed to bring luck or divine favor. Science was still in its infancy, so tradition reigned. Speaking of feast days, Easter arrives. Not with chocolate or bunnies, but with fasting, celebration, and a heavily anticipated break from turnips. The village priest organizes a simple mass. Everyone shows up, even the guy who swore off organized religion after a sheep bit him during Lent. Long story. You wear your best tunic. Agnes wears flowers in her hair. The chapel smells of candle wax and wet wool. But it feels hopeful. Afterward, there's food. Real food. Fresh bread. Finally, cheese. Glorious cheese. A roasted goose. Contributed by someone's wealthy cousin who no one actually remembers inviting. You eat until you're dizzy. Then you lie in the grass and stare at clouds. One looks like the steward. You briefly consider throwing bread at it. And now that the fields are sown, you start thinking about everything else. The fences need mending. The well's crank squeaks. The door on your storage hut swings in the wind like it's trying to escape. You make a list. You immediately regret making a list. It's never ending. But you're not alone. People work together. They joke, argue, swap tools, and occasionally hurl shoes at stubborn animals. The carpenter finally finishes the bench she started in December. You finally fix the hinge that's been squeaking since October. It's communal, messy, and oddly satisfying. Historians still argue whether medieval village cooperation was a sign of grassroots democracy or just the byproduct of everyone being equally miserable. Either way, it works. And then there's the market. Once the roads dry, traders begin showing up again, like crows after a storm. They bring cloth, spices, salt, and the occasional highly suspect elixir that promises to cure gout, baldness, and demonic possession. You're not buying that, but you do trade for a new knife. And you overhear rumors, whispers about distant battles, a noble's castle collapsing during a drunken wedding, a pilgrimage gone wildly off course and ending in Norway by accident. Oops. Most notably, word of a new count coming to inspect the region. Your village buzzes. A count means attention. Attention means taxes, possibly rebuilding, possibly conscription, or maybe Just maybe. Nothing at all. But you know better than to assume nothing. A quirky tidbit. Medieval counts often traveled with portable courts, scribes, and armed escorts, more pageantry than practicality. They'd stay in manners, eat well, make declarations, then vanish before anyone could protest. So you prepare. The reeve polishes his boots. The priest practices his Latin. You clean your house. It feels silly, but everyone's doing it. The village becomes a flurry of dusting, scrubbing, sweeping. Even the goats look offended. Agnes jokes. Maybe if we look poor enough, he'll just leave. You laugh. But inside, you're not so sure. A week later, they arrive. Trumpets, horses, velvet cloaks. The count looks exactly like someone who's never seen a compost pile. He tours the fields, nods vaguely, speaks only through a steward, who mispronounces your village name twice. Then comes the decree, an extra levy. Of course, just a small one, he says, just a temporary one. You feel your fists tighten. But you also feel Agnes beside you, whispering, "We've handled worse." And she's right. So you sign. You grumble. You pay. But you don't break. And in the weeks that follow, something curious happens. The count leaves. But one of his men, an old scribe, stays behind. He's injured. Something about falling off a mule during the inspection. His leg's in a splint. He's stuck. So the village takes care of him. They feed him, house him. Even the children bring him little drawings, most of which look like dragons fighting carrots. You chat with him one night by the fire, and he tells you stories. Not gossip, not politics, history, of places you've never seen, of wars and kings, of lost cities and vanished tongues. He even shows you how to write your name. The letters feel strange in your hand, like magic symbols. But you write it. You really write it. It's clumsy, slanted, but it's yours. A mainstream historical fact. Literacy among peasants was rare but not non-existent, especially among those who served in military roles. Monasteries, or traveled extensively. Some learned out of curiosity, others, out of necessity. You begin practicing, scratching letters into wood, tracing symbols in dust. You feel your brain stretch, your world expand. Not everything is mud and millet. Not everything is goats and taxes. There's more, and you're reaching for it. One spring afternoon, the scribe gives you a tiny book. It's tattered, handwritten, filled with stories and sketches. Yours now, he says. You open it. Inside, a note. Not all treasure is silver and grain. You don't cry, but you do stare at the page for a very long time. That evening, you walk up the hill. Not for chores, just to sit. You watch the fields glow in the golden light. You see the village below, crooked and stubborn. You hear children laughing, someone chopping wood, a sheep arguing with a duck. You are tired. You are alive. And you are, somehow, free. The sun starts rising earlier now. You notice it creeping under the edge of your shutter, poking at your eyelids before the rooster even considers opening his beak. You squint, grumble, throw your arm over your face. No good. It's time. You stretch, creak like old leather, and pad barefoot across the wooden floor. The fire is low, your breath visible in the morning air. But there's something hopeful in the chill today. The earth is soft again. The air smells like growing things. And something else. Smoke. Not yours. You pull open the door. Across the village green, a chimney coughs up black plumes, thicker than usual. It's the potter. He's finally fired up his kiln. After a long, idle winter, the artisans are waking up. 2. You wrap your cloak tight and head over. The kiln is hissing, spitting, alive. The potter's face is flushed from the heat, his hands streaked with clay. He waves you over, lifts the lid of a jug cooling on a nearby bench. You take it in your hands, smooth, light, perfectly imperfect. You run your fingers along the curve, smell the faint tang of minerals and fire. And you wonder, as you always do, how does dirt become this? It's magic, the honest kind. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval pottery wasn't just functional, it was status. Glazed pieces indicated access to trade routes and advanced kilns. Most peasants used crude, unglazed wares, but even those were treasured. You trade half a sack of barley for the jug. The potter nods, satisfied. Trade is alive again. The wheels greased by warming air and idle winter dreams. And you're not the only one dreaming. Everywhere, people are building, mending, making. The smithy glows into the night. A young girl weaves baskets from willow branches. A shepherd paints crude animals on his barn for no apparent reason. It's like spring has slipped into everyone's fingers, including yours. You finally patch that leak in the roof. You finally rehang the shutters. And, somehow, you get roped into building a chicken coop. You don't even own chickens. But your neighbor does. And she's got a sharp tongue and a sharper ladle. And it's easier to just help than argue. Besides, there's something oddly soothing about the work. The soft tap of hammer on wood. The occasional cluck of disapproval. The smell of sawdust and sun. You're in a rhythm now. One foot in front of the other. One task at a time. And it's good. Of course. You get blisters. Of course. The roof slants the wrong way the first time. Of course. One of the chickens escapes mid-construction and disappears into the woods like a feathery fugitive. You chase it for half a mile. You do not win. You return to the village covered in burrs and shame. The children laugh. You laugh, too. And somewhere in that moment, you realize something strange. You're happy. Not in the feasting, fireworks, celebratory kind of way. More like content. Like the dirt under your nails finally belongs there. Like the ache in your back means something. Like this life, ridiculous and relentless, fits you now. But happiness doesn't stop the world. The steward returns. He's got news. The road to the next town is passable again. That means two things. First, trade fairs. Second, taxes. You groan. But you also grab your bag. Because as much as you grumble, the fair is something you secretly look forward to. It's like a festival collided with a marketplace. Then exploded in color and smells. You walk with others, some on foot, some with carts. Along the way, you pass hedgerows buzzing with bees, fields dotted with sheep, and the occasional monastery perched like a quiet thought on the horizon. The fairground is chaos. There's music, shrill flutes, booming drums. There are smells, baking bread, roasting meats, the sharp sting of vinegar from pickled turnips. There are voices, bargaining, shouting, laughing, chanting. You dive in. You trade your jug for a new belt. You try honey cakes and regret nothing. You buy a tiny wooden carving of a boar for no good reason other than it makes you smile. A quirky tidbit. Many medieval fairs included bizarre performances. From dancing bears to fire swallowers to people who claimed to speak with the dead, usually for a fee and a conveniently vague accent. You even watch a puppet show. It's terrible. You love it. And then, something new. A man standing atop a barrel, preaching about the stars. He's not a priest. Not quite. He speaks in riddles. Diagrams in the dirt with a stick. Gestures to the sky. You sidle closer. He talks of eclipses. Of tides. Of Saturn's influence on barley harvests. He says your birth date aligns with Mars, which might explain your chronic bad luck with chickens. Historians still argue whether medieval astrology was science, superstition, or proto-psychology, but it was deeply embedded in daily life. You listen, entranced, not because you believe him, but because something about the stars feels possible. You buy a scrap of parchment with a hand-drawn zodiac. You tuck it into your tunic. You don't know why. You just do. The fair ends in the usual way, with a flurry of drunken singing and someone falling into a fish barrel. Not you. Thank heavens. You walk home under a velvet sky, the stars bright and smug above you. And the next morning, it's back to work. Because always, there is work. You and Agnes check the fields. The barley's sprouting, tiny green spears poking through the dirt. Brave and hungry, you feel something flutter in your chest. Hope, pride, panic, maybe all three. You start watching the weather obsessively. Every cloud is suspect. Every breeze is a prophecy. When the rains come, you cheer until it doesn't stop. 3 days, then 5, then 7. The fields are a puddle again. You wait, you pace, you grumble to the sky. Eventually, it clears. The barley survives. Barely. You swear off weather predictions. And astrology. And possibly clouds. But then the bees arrive. Dozens, hundreds. They pour into the hedgerows, buzzing like tiny prophets. The flowers explode in color. And Agnes tells you, this means the fruit will be good this year. You choose to believe her, because she's usually right, and even if she's not, well, it's nice to think so. Another quirky medieval belief. Bees were considered sacred messengers. If someone died, it was custom to tell the bees or risk bad luck. You whisper a joke to one. It ignores you. Rude. But something else has shifted now. The village is humming. The animals are frisky. The children are sticky with berries. The nights are longer, warmer, full of murmurs and moths. One evening, you host a small fire outside your home. Just a few neighbors, a jug of cider, a loaf of bread, some cheese. You talk, you laugh, you argue about whether horses can dream. Someone sings, someone else snores. The stars watch silently, and you realize, as you pass the cider, that your world is still small, but not as small as it used to be. The jug, the parchment, the name you wrote by firelight, these are all seeds. And something is growing, not just in the fields. In you. The clouds today are dramatic. Not the gloomy, smothering kind. No, these are the grand, billowing sort that drift slowly across the sky like a traveling play. You lie in the grass for a minute, pretending one of them is shaped like a goat wearing a crown. You chuckle to yourself. It's a rare moment of quiet. Summer's just begun, and there's a softness to the day, a lull between chaos. You know it won't last. Already, the steward has passed along a new list of duties. Help repair the bridge. Rotate the communal grain bins. Mend the town's old bell rope. Apparently it snapped mid-ring, startling a donkey into the river. No one retrieved the donkey. He swam back later, offended. But for now, you breathe. Your hands are cracked from labor. Your face freckled from sun. A beetle crawls across your boot, indifferent to your presence. And for a moment, you wonder, is this the best it ever gets? It might be, but best is relative, especially in the 1300s. Because just over the horizon, still quiet, still invisible, something is coming. It begins with a whisper from the next village. Someone's fevered, coughing, covered in strange swellings. Then it's 2 people, then 12, and then it jumps, like lightning. Suddenly, people are staying home, doors are shut, markets are half empty. You hear someone say the word, pestilence. Your stomach knots. A mainstream historical fact, the Black Death, beginning in the mid-14th century, killed an estimated 30% to 60% of Europe's population in just a few years. It was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. No one knows what's happening yet. They just know it's bad. You see signs. The steward stops visiting. A priest rides through on a donkey, clutching incense, muttering prayers in a language no one understands. You huddle with your neighbors at night. Agnes is unusually quiet. The children are kept inside. And then it hits. You wake to the sound of wailing. The potter's wife is gone. The next day, it's the baker's apprentice. You don't go near the bakery anymore. People speak of boils, of bleeding, of rats. You spot a rat in your storehouse. You throw a shoe at it. The shoe misses. The rat blinks at you like it knows something. And that's the terrifying part. No one knows what's happening. And what you don't understand, you fear. Quirky belief time. Many believe the plague was caused by bad air or miasma, and wore long-nosed masks filled with herbs. Others blamed astrological alignments. One popular theory claimed the Jews had poisoned the wells, leading to horrific violence and pogroms. You don't believe any of that. Mostly, you're just scared. So is everyone else. Soon, the bells stop ringing for the dead, because there are too many to count. The graveyard fills. Fast. They dig a pit. You don't go to the pit, but you see it, and you remember who's in it. You stop shaking hands. You sleep in shifts. You burn herbs. You pray. You stop praying. You drink. You sing. You weep. You wake in the middle of the night, your heart hammering, sure that this is the day it reaches your door. Historians still argue whether the plague spread more through fleas on rats or through person-to-person airborne transmission. It likely used both. You get lucky. Or maybe you just keep your head down. You help build a quarantine hut for the afflicted. You deliver food without speaking. You wash obsessively. You avoid the steward, who now wears a cloth soaked in vinegar tied around his neck and claims it's doctor's magic. Your village survives. Mostly. You lose people. But somehow, you don't lose yourself. And that changes you. Not in a dramatic, epic way. No heroic monologue. More like a gradual, quiet resolve. You become gentler with the children. You speak more often with Agnes. Even if she still scolds you about your boots. You help replant the orchard. Though it's not technically your job. You let the donkey eat from your garden. Because honestly, he's earned it. The village holds a service for the dead. There's no priest left, so it's just you and a few others. Reading scraps of prayers from memory. Humming the melodies you grew up with. The wind carries your voices. It's imperfect, but it's real. You sit with Agnes afterward. You share a stale honey cake. She says something about seasons, how they always turn back toward light. You want to believe her. So you do. Then come the rumors. People are talking about wages. About power. About the way things were, and the way they could be. You hear whispers. We deserve more. And for the first time. That doesn't sound ridiculous. Because half the village is gone. And the ones left are valuable. Suddenly, the steward needs you more than you need him. He asks you to work. You say, only if I get more grain. He hesitates. Then agrees. You nearly faint from the shock. A mainstream fact, after the plague. The scarcity of labor allowed peasants to demand better conditions. While some gains were rolled back later, the immediate aftermath saw wages rise and feudal bonds loosen. You are no longer just a replaceable cog. You're part of something bigger now. Not a rebellion, yet, but a shift. You notice it in little things. The steward speaks to you, not at you. The manor opens its gate for discussion. Even the scribe, that smug ink-fingered owl, seems less condescending when recording your grain allotment. You wonder if it'll last. Historians still debate how much the plague actually empowered peasants long-term, but the social fabric was undoubtedly stretched. And you're learning how to stretch with it. You spend your days working. But not just to survive. You're saving. You're planning. You're, dare you say it, dreaming. You look at that field by the river. The one you've always thought would make a fine orchard if only it weren't owned by that absentee noble. And you think, maybe someday. You look at the children, now older, bolder, and you think, maybe their world will be wider than mine. You look at Agnes, and, well, that's complicated. She still thinks your handwriting is an affront to God and logic. But she also made you a scarf. A very ugly scarf. You wear it anyway. Because that's what people do now. They care for each other. They rebuild. Together. One day, while foraging in the woods for early mushrooms, you stumble upon something. A small stone carving. Half buried in moss. It's a face. Crude. Weathered. But undeniably human. You clean it gently. No inscription. No clue. Just a little reminder that people were here long before you. And they survived. So will you. You take it home. Place it by your fire. You tell it. You've seen worse. And you believe it. Because now, so have you. You stretch. Just a little. Your back cracks like an old timber beam. And your knees sound like someone stepped on a bundle of dry twigs. But that's fine. That's how knees are now. It's the late 1300s. And your skeleton has aged 40 years in the past 5. But hey, you're alive. The worst seems to be over. The bells toll again, slowly. Yes, but they toll. The market is open, though fewer stalls stand. Children play again, screaming as they chase a sack-stuffed pig through the muddy square. For the first time in a long time, life feels more than just survival. And that's precisely when things start to get complicated. You knew peace wouldn't last. You're a medieval peasant, not a character in a bedtime lullaby. Because now, people have ideas. Big ones. Like freedom. Like ownership. Like, what if I don't want to live like this anymore? One of the biggest ripple effects of the Black Death wasn't just death, it was what came after. In many areas, especially England, the massive population drop left labor in high demand. That gave peasants leverage, and leverage leads to ambition. And ambition makes kings nervous. The king, of course, is still very much a distant concept to you. You've never seen him. You've seen drawings, more halo than human, and you've heard songs about his divine right. But the only king you interact with is the one who collects taxes on his behalf. And that guy just raised the rate again. Funny, isn't it? You survived the apocalypse, and now they want more money. At first, the mood is murmur why. Quiet complaints, eye rolls. Someone carves a rude word into the manor door, which they cleverly disguise as a holy sigil when questioned. Then comes the poll tax. A tax not on land or income, but just for being alive. Everyone over a certain age has to pay. Even your teenage neighbor who owns nothing but a feral chicken named Beyonce. The resentment boils. You hear talk, openly now, of rebellion. A mainstream fact, in 1381, the English peasants' revolt broke out in response to the poll tax. Economic hardship, and the rigid feudal system. It was one of the most significant uprisings of the medieval period. You're not in London. You're not even close. But news travels, not through tweets or broadcasts, but through traveling merchants and very dramatic monks. They say people are marching. They say they're demanding justice. They say they killed a royal advisor. You nearly drop your bucket. Because now it feels real. In your own village, something changes. Not overnight, but steadily. That big empty barn? Meetings happen there now. Quiet ones. With candles and lowered voices. You're invited. You go. Not because you're a revolutionary. But because you're curious. And tired. Inside, you see faces you've known all your life. Some angry. Some frightened. All tired. You hear words like liberty and wage rights and abolish serfdom. You raise your hand and ask. But, won't they just kill us all? There's an awkward pause. Then someone shrugs and says, maybe, but maybe not. Which, all things considered, is the most optimistic thing you've heard in weeks. A fringe tidbit. Some rebels during the Peasants' Revolt claimed they would make King Richard king of the commons. Suggesting not the abolition of monarchy, but a version that worked for the people. Others had more radical ideas, like eliminating all ranks entirely. The tension grows. Agnes isn't thrilled. She calls it silly business, and insists on keeping the door bolted every night. But even she seems intrigued. Especially when your neighbor Thomas, the stonemason, starts quoting Bible verses about equality. Loudly. You remember when Thomas used to get excited about new chisels. Now he's talking about divine justice. Things are changing. Fast. You start doing the math. If enough villages join, if enough lords get nervous, maybe this isn't just a tantrum. Maybe it's history. But before anything happens, before you pick up that old pitchfork you definitely weren't hiding under your floorboards, the crackdown begins. The manor sends soldiers. Not many. Just enough to remind you who's in charge. They stand near the church like gargoyles with steel hats. No one speaks to them. They don't speak to you. But they don't have to. Their message is clear. We're watching. Historians still argue whether the revolt was truly revolutionary or just a desperate push for survival. Was it a class war? A protest? Or simply a scream for dignity in a system that offered none? You don't know. You just know that people are afraid again. Not of disease, but of hope. Because hope, when crushed, hurts worse than fear. The meetings stop. Or rather, go deeper underground. The barn burns down. Lightning. They say. You're not so sure. Thomas disappears. They say he went to London. You hope he made it. The air shifts. Not backward. Just, quieter. You still work. Still till the fields. Still mend fences. But now, everything's charged. Like there's lightning waiting in the soil. You get smarter. You teach the kids to read, well, sort of, letters, names. Enough. You learn to write your own name with something resembling dignity. Agnes says it looks like a chicken got into the ink. You call that progress. The steward calls a village meeting. He uses words like reconciliation and new terms. And he offers you something. Not a gift, not a favor, but a concession. Lower rents, slightly better food rations, a say in crop rotations. It's not the revolution. But it's not nothing. You nod slowly. He doesn't smile. But you both understand. You don't burn the manor. He doesn't raise the tax. For now. That's how change happens sometimes. Not with fire. but with a quiet agreement between people who remember what fire looks like. And yet, you wonder, if not now, then when? If not you, then who? You still have the pitchfork. You still remember the songs. You still think about Thomas. You see a child wearing a crown made of willow branches. She declares herself queen of the ducks and commands 3 boys to fetch pond water. They obey without hesitation. You think, maybe she'll grow up different. Maybe she won't even know what serfdom is. That would be nice. As the sun sets, you sit beside Agnes. She hands you a bowl of stew and says, "No rebellions tonight, just dinner." You smile, but you don't throw the pitchfork away. Not yet, because the world is still turning. And so are you. The stew is warm. The air smells faintly of wet straw. And your legs ache in that reliable, lived-in way. You'd think this would be the calm part, post-rebellion, post-plague, what now? But if the Middle Ages have taught you anything, it's this: the quiet never lasts. You wake one morning to find strangers outside your village gate. They're not soldiers, not beggars, and definitely not locals. They're monks, or something monk adjacent. Pale robes, dark eyes, calloused feet, and that particular way of speaking like every sentence is part of a sermon. They're looking for heretics. You blink. Heretics? You barely know your apostles from your archangels. How could you have committed heresy? You barely commit laundry. But it turns out heresy, like taxes, has a flexible definition. One mainstream fact: in the late medieval period, religious orthodoxy tightened, and heretical movements like the Lollards, in England, or the Cathars, earlier in France, were increasingly hunted down by church and crown authorities. The Inquisition wasn't just a Spanish phenomenon, it had echoes across Europe. You overhear the monks ask the steward about books. Books? Nobody here can read more than their own name in a good light with enough patience and a finger under each syllable. Still, someone mentioned that Thomas left behind a book. A big one, with margins scribbled full of strange Latin. Oops. Agnes sees your face and immediately narrows her eyes. You don't have the book. Do you? You do not respond in words. But you definitely do have the book. Well, had. You buried it, under the pigpen, 2 months ago. After reading a passage that made your spine feel like ice. Something about the Pope being just another man in a big hat. Yikes. Fringe tidbit. Some heretical sects claimed that any Christian could be their own priest, no clergy required. Others believed that all church sacraments were null unless performed by someone who lived virtuously. To the medieval church, this was like someone today denying Wi-Fi exists. Utter madness. Deeply offensive, and potentially contagious. You try to lie low. But something about lying low seems to attract attention. Like gravity for suspicion. One day, you're summoned to speak with the monks. They offer honeyed smiles, wine, and questions with no correct answers. Do you believe all men are equal before God? Yes. Do you believe the church should own land? No. Each answer hangs in the air like a fly waiting for the swat. Historians still argue whether most heresy trials were genuinely spiritual inquiries or just politically motivated witch hunts. Maybe both, maybe neither, maybe it depended on how grumpy the bishop was that week. Somehow, you pass. Maybe because you feign dumbness convincingly. Maybe because you throw in a lot of amens. Maybe because Agnes elbows you every time you open your mouth. The monks move on, but they leave behind a chill. Not on your skin. In your soul. Because you realize now, you don't trust the church anymore. Not fully. You still go to mass. Still say your prayers. Still cross yourself when thunder strikes. But it's different. You listen to the priest's sermon. But you also listen around it. You notice the emphasis on obedience. You notice how every problem somehow leads back to sin. You notice how that sin always costs you something. Money. Labor. Privacy. You start to wonder. Maybe this is how it starts. Not with torches, but with questions. The world is changing again. Not dramatically, but deeply. The economy creaks forward. Markets reappear. You travel to the next town for a fair and are shocked to see items you've only heard of: sugar, glass, books with gold paint. Your teeth tingle just looking at the sugar. Your hands twitch reaching for the books. There are more towns now. More people. The roads feel busier. More woven together. You meet a man who's been to Italy. You ask what it's like. He says, too many poets. You don't know what that means. But you like the idea that someone would complain about too much poetry. Trade grows. Ideas hitch rides on wagons, tucked between barrels and bolts of cloth. And slowly, ever so slowly, people like you learn. You learn to speak differently. You learn that other people don't live quite as miserably. You hear about bankers. You're not sure what they do, but they sound rich and suspicious. You hear about universities. And you think, why would anyone willingly go to a place with more books than pigs? You hear about humanism, which sounds like a heresy and a stomach condition, frankly. But you also hear about this idea that maybe human beings are worth something, just as they are. That's new. You don't say it out loud. You don't write it down. But you feel it when you watch the sunrise over the fields and realize they belong to someone else. But you made them beautiful. The manor changes hands. The old lord dies of gout or boredom. The new one is younger, sharper, and less interested in tradition. He wears fancy boots and speaks like someone who's read about Rome a little too much. He introduces contracts, actual, written agreements about what you do and what you get. It's weird. It's almost fair. You squint at the parchment and wonder how many people had to die before something this simple became possible. The world creaks forward again. Still hard. Still unfair. But different. You notice little things. A girl in your village paints. Not walls, pictures. She sells one to a merchant who laughs and calls it ugly but honest. A boy wants to be a scribe, not a farmer. You can't believe your ears. But then he shows you a letter he wrote in Latin and you nearly faint from pride. Or heat stroke. Hard to tell anymore. Agnes slows down. Her knees are shot. She insists it's from years of church kneeling. But you know it's from chasing you across wet fields for the past 2 decades. You both sit more these days. And talk. About old friends. Lost seasons. Silly dreams you never admitted to. She says she once wanted to see the sea. You say, we should go. She laughs like you told her a joke. But then she says, maybe we will. And for once, you believe her. There's something in the air. Not just change. Possibility. Even the sky looks different. Not brighter, but clearer. And one night, while lying in your little hay-stuffed bed, you think, this isn't the dark ages anymore. Is it? You don't know what age it is now. But it's not that. Not the same fear. Not the same silence. You fall asleep with your hand on Agnes's and your feet near the fire. Somewhere in the distance, a child sings a nonsense rhyme. You smile. The world isn't fixed, but it's healing. And for now, that's enough. The first thing you notice when you wake up is that the birds sound confident. Not just chirping, belting, like they have something to say. And they're done being shy about it. The second thing you notice is that your back no longer protests quite as loudly when you sit up. The third thing? That Agnes is already outside, talking to someone in a doublet way too clean for these parts. You hobble out, and he turns toward you with the unmistakable glow of someone who knows how to read and wants everyone else to know it. He's carrying a stack of papers, no, pamphlets, slim, printed sheets with words all over them. Identical words, like they've been copied by magic. He's from the city. He's distributing books for the people. He says, people like you. You look at the pamphlet. It's a poem, a funny one, about a dog that runs off with a priest's sausage. You don't get every word, but you get the joke. And you laugh, really laugh. One mainstream historical fact. By the late 15th century, the printing press had begun to transform Europe. Ideas could now travel farther, faster, and more affordably than ever before. For the first time, even common folk began to engage with written materials, changing the course of education, religion, and political thought. It's been decades since you first stumbled into the mud and mess of a village where your shoes rotted off before your first harvest. You've seen wars, famines, witches, taxes on salt, strange monks, less strange monks, 3 funerals for 1 cow, and a pig that once bit the Reeve Square on the backside. You've survived, which is already more than most. But you've done more than survive. You've lived. You've made small decisions, petty arguments, quiet acts of kindness, weird hunches followed in the dark, that somehow moved the great. Clunky wheel of history a hair forward. Agnes still paints, now on wood scraps and cracked tile. The boy who once wrote in Latin now writes in 2 languages and teaches the baker's son to write his name. A small wooden cross sits at the edge of the village, not for saints or kings, but for a woman who once delivered half the babies here and could identify 30 kinds of mushrooms without blinking. You feel a shift, a soft, invisible one. This place, this time, it's not medieval anymore. You don't know what to call it, but there's color in the walls now, a little more meat in the stew, stories traded like coins in the square, and not all of them about sin and suffering. You sit on a bench by the road with Agnes and watch a troupe of jugglers pass through. Real entertainers. Their tricks are mediocre, but their clothes are loud and joyful. I'd forgotten people could be silly. You say. Agnes nods. I never did. You both smile and let the moment stretch. Quiet and long. Fringe tidbit. Before the Renaissance fully blossomed, there were already little, mini renaissances, scattered throughout Europe, like the 12th century Renaissance of learning, when Aristotle was retranslated into Latin, or the Carolingian Renaissance under Charlemagne. History, it turns out, doesn't just flip switches, it kindles sparks. Historians still argue whether the end of the Middle Ages was a clean break or a slow fade. Some draw the line at the fall of Constantinople, others, at Columbus setting sail. Some say it never really ended, just changed costumes. But for you, it's simpler. The world now feels reachable. Not fixed, not fair, but reachable. You could go to a city. Maybe. You could see the sea. You could learn to read. Even now. And so, one morning, you pack a bag, bread, cheese, a sketch from Agnes, and that ridiculous dog poem. You leave the village with sore feet, a full heart, and no clue where the road goes next. But you don't feel lost. Just curious. Just ready. Because against every odd, every plague, every war, every blizzard and broken system, you've made it. You've made it out of the Dark Ages. And you did it without antibiotics, Google Maps, or a single reliable fork. Well done, you. So now, dear listener, it's time to close your eyes and let the glow of torches and flickering hearts drift far. Far into the past. You've walked long roads, crossed cold rivers, shared stew with strangers, and whispered quiet thoughts in candlelight, all within this strange and shadowy world we called the Dark Ages. But maybe now you see, it wasn't all darkness. It was full of noise and struggle. Yes, but also small courage, the kind you carry in your pocket and forget until you need it. People dreamed, even then. They loved and built and doubted and tried. And slowly, night by night, they carved a path toward something warmer, something wider. You were part of that journey tonight. So wherever you are, in a quiet room, curled beneath blankets, or on a slow train rocking through the night, know that the chaos of history is softer now. It can't touch you here. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts settle. Maybe you see the old stone walls now, soft with ivy. Maybe you hear church bells in the far distance. Or maybe it's just the wind, humming low, like a lullaby from long ago. Either way, you're safe now. Tomorrow can wait. For now, sleep, deep and dreamless. You've earned it.